The reason that the VAR gave was that he wasn't denying a goal-scoring opportunity. But Erling Haaland was running through on goal, and I'm not quite sure what more sort of goal-scoring opportunity you need.
But when you said everyone in Britain was supporting the Palace, even the VAR.
I don't want to imply that, Rog, but maybe.
No, I saw nothing, says the VAR, wearing a 1980s Palace shirt and singing Glad All Over, pouring beers on their own head. We back, like HBO Max, just in time for Crystal Palace's greatest hour. Oh, the overwhelming feel-good joy of watching South London's finest win their first domestic trophy in 119 years of existence with total class. The whole world's glad all over, and a better place for it, I like to believe, as Pep Guardiola finishes the season with the exact same number of trophies as Everton Football Club. The race for the Champions League places could not be tighter. Oh, not to go all Mad Max on your asses. 5 teams enter, 3 teams will leave. Manchester United and Spurs, not you, but they continue to battle to show who has had a more Newark airport of a season. We're charging to the Europa League final. One of these teams will be in the Champions League next season, people. My God, that game is going to be like a knife fight between Theon from Game of Thrones and Ralph Wiggum. And then we sobbed for Everton's truly moving, quite beautifully choreographed Goodison Park last dance. In the words of the Lars, there she goes again. And to break it all down, I'm not here alone. Behold, if it's not the Crown Prince of Harrogate, Terry's chocolate orange connoisseur from The Observer, it's my friend, it's Mr. Rory Smith.
The best line of the week, Rog, applies to the Manchester United Tottenham Hotspur Europa League final. The stoppable force against the movable object.
No one will be moving Ange Postecoglou. Of that, I assure you, I'm not going to change, mate. But Roy, you were at Wembley this weekend. I think the cameras caught you sobbing in your red and blue, just holding on to all those you love around you. That innocent joy, Roy, in English top-flight football, I have not seen its like. What's your most abiding memory of the experience?
There's so much, Rog, because it felt like such a rare occasion. And I can't stress this enough, and this is meant as no disrespect to Manchester City fans or to Brighton fans, but I'm not sure I can remember a game in which the entire nation of Britain wanted one team to win so much.
I think since the Battle of Britain itself, right? Oh no, maybe there were more people supporting Palace. Arguably.
Even then, you had Lord Haw and Oswald Mosley, yeah. But other than that, the entire country was just united behind Palace, and they are. I think, without romanticising them too much, I feel like they are a club that is very difficult to dislike. They've got really kind of inspiring, likeable, lovable stars. Eberechi Eze, you can't object to Eberechi Eze. They have a manager who seems really kind of emotionally mature and sensible, and his perspective and the way that he kind of approaches things just seems so smart. They're built not on a shoestring, they're a Premier League team, but they're built on a relative budget. But the thing about Palace that always gets me is the fans. The Holmesdale Fanatics, the one true ultra group in English football. The song they have every time Palace score, the "We Support the Palace, the Palace, the Palace," that one. They normally reserve it for when they've scored, and then as you're waiting for kick-off, they'll do that. They'll all kind of put their arms out in the air, doing like magician's fingers, and they'll go whoa, waiting for the kick-off to happen so the game restarts. And the Palace fans, led by the Ultras, they did it before kick-off of the cup final. So as everyone's kind of getting into position and the referee's checking his watch and the boots and all that stuff, you just had this sort of dull roar around the cup final. The entire stadium of the Palace fans going, whoa. And it really built the tension, and it made it feel like such an occasion, like such a kind of pinnacle of the season, of that club's history. They'd never won a major trophy. For those fans to see them celebrate at the end, to feel all of that kind of energy trickle through them, to get that reward, it was an absolute privilege to be there. It really was.
We will be talking a lot more about the Palace fans in this show. Also, Oliver Glasner, a remarkable man, age 37, had a brain hemorrhage, had to teach himself to walk and talk again. And it's really shaped the cultures he tries to build. He was just on our show on Friday on YouTube. Didn't get the chance to really talk to him. Talked about the brain hemorrhage, but as a result, there's things he does. He turns his phone off every night at 10 o'clock, no matter what. It's his way of saying, this is my life. Life is more important than football. You can catch me in the morning. So many things he does that are remarkable. To see it all ultimately rewarded in such wonderful style. As a capper to this season, on the British broadcast, I think Alan Shearer called this one the year of the underdog, 2025, the Palace win, the Newcastle victory in the Carabao, albeit with its backstory of Saudi Arabian funding. The rise of Nottingham Forest nudging, please God, towards the Champions League places. That brilliant middle class of football, Brighton, Brentford, Bournemouth. I do wonder if this is a one-off. Raw, is this the new reality where ultimately there's so much money now in Premier League football that it's trickled down to everyone? In a way that reminds me a little bit of that classic Francis Ford Coppola Hearts of Darkness quote about the making of Apocalypse Now. We had access to too much money, too much equipment, and little by little we went insane.
I'm really wary of saying it's kind of a new dawn, that this is the new normal, because we've had seasons like this before where you feel that something's shifted, that something's changed, and maybe we are entering a
Leicester,
new era.
Hello.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden it's just back to normal, and it's the next season. It's the Manchester City get 109 points, and the top four are Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester United, and it feels as though.
By the way, that would be almost the fan fiction part of this. That's the one thing that would be almost incredible to witness, a Manchester United comeback.
Just the whole country really united behind Manchester United being good again. That will never happen, Rog. Yeah. There's too much bitterness, too much rancor.
God, I remember when they were small enough just to have a barbecue after they won the Europa League.
But I think this time it does feel a bit different to me. I am hopeful that if we say it often enough, it will kind of manifest itself into being. Those teams, Brentford, Brighton, Bournemouth, the 3 Bs, they're too smart to fall away immediately. Palace will continue to recruit well and to have a coach who can get the best out of those relatively, in comparison, relatively limited resources. So I feel like this should be how it is from now on. There are drawbacks to that. There are downsides. The gap with the Championship is a problem. The effect it's having on the rest of Europe is a real issue as well, because all of the talent is coalescing in England. But from a purely Premier League perspective, I think it stays like this. And you still have United and Tottenham and the game's real sleeping giant, Rog, waiting to throw himself into the mix.
Are you talking about Beverton?
I'm talking about Beverton.
Yeah, Beverton. All the big teams with the Bees are the newcomers. Honestly, I am starting a petition to change the name. New stadium, Beverton. Who is that newcomer, Everton? They're so bloody good now. But it is fascinating because not only that is going on, but we're also in like this kind of post-meaning era of football. I've thought about this a lot this weekend, Raw. We've over the past couple of weeks, every week we touch base before the weekend. We're like, well, we won't have too much to talk about anymore. The league's done. Liverpool players literally doing shots on a boat, partying at levels known only to Jordan Belfort. Their games mean historically nothing. The relegation teams have long been flung out of the moon door. We don't even hear their agonised cries anymore. We're kind of like, there won't be much to talk about, but weekend after weekend, there is so much narrative. This week we had Jamie Vardy retire, Everton Stadium farewell, which was really beautiful and long, and you could do a whole show about the choreography there. And because we're so knee deep in this social media era of football, in which everything has meaning on the field a little bit, but it's off the field, Raw. The pre-match sing-alongs, the tifos, the guards of honour. The guards of honour now for players leaving the club. The heavily pre-planned celebrations, which have exquisite choreography. Rasmus Højlund bringing a watch on, a branded watch. I'm just judging that by the speed with which I won't say their name, but the brand got all over any social media post and held the game up for 6 minutes. Fan shots in which the supporters become almost a ritualised part of the content. Rival fans inserting themselves into big moments by subterfuge, aka repackaging the wrong coloured smoke flares in key moments. The results, Raw, have rarely felt more irrelevant.
Yeah, I suppose what we're seeing is the pageantry of football given centre stage, aren't we? Because so few of the games, other than those in the race for Europe, so few of the games have any real meaning. We are, to some extent, searching for exterior meaning. So, Vardy's goodbye or the farewell to Goodison Park.
Posterior meaning.
Or even like, will Liverpool fans boo Trent? How much is he getting booed? Like, there's all this other stuff going on. There was a bit of a hullabaloo on Friday because obviously Tottenham and Manchester United took different approaches to to resting players ahead of the Europa League. And rested everybody. Amorim went pretty strong. They both lost. It's still Spurs and Manchester United. But even that felt like effectively, those games were not relevant to how either Spurs or Man United finished the season. They were relevant to Chelsea and Aston Villa, of course, but it felt like they were sideshows. And the real story was almost the selection of the players. That's how that fits into the narrative. That was the crucial thing, because the football itself, and this has been true for a long time, and maybe we're only seeing it now most clearly. The actual football, the kicking of balls, is only part of the product. It's only part of what's being sold.
You've nailed it. It is. It's like Mason Mount coming on in a Manchester United jersey, starting against Chelsea. The level of analysis of how much he was booed in the week after the Trent booing analysis. I mean, it's almost as if booing is now the new tactical analysis rule.
xBoo. That's what we need. Expected boos per game. Obviously, Brighton-Liverpool is happening after we record. I'm guessing that Trent Alexander-Arnold, should he play, will have an xBoo of 1 or 0.99. Connor Bradley probably an xBoo of 0.01. I would guess. Amazing. What he does. This is what you need. xBoo.
You know, like they have a referee that they wake up whenever there's a ex-referee on the commentary now.
Deploy Mike Dean.
Yeah, no, they'll bring in like Nelson Muntz just about. Can you break down the boo? They'll have like a booing expert. Is genuinely where we're heading, and in many ways, I think football is all the better for it, because it is now the ultimate canvas, the most watched canvas for expressing yourself, for experiencing, for human experience, for analysing human experience and expression. To feel well anything really, alive or dead or all of it. Even in games in which there's nothing to compete for, to play for, Premier League football still serves up emotion after emotion. God bless you, xBoo. Get on it, Opta. So much life in it, trapped in there. It cannot be believed. So much that barely makes sense, to be candid. And I love it. And it's time to dive in. So let's start with a toast. I want to raise my third first Michelob Ultra of the day to Crystal Palace, the club, the generations of fans and their passion, which was captured in, for me, the most poignant moment of the day. It actually came in the seconds before kick-off, as the deeply, deeply, profoundly passionate Crystal Palace fans raised a tifo. Not to go all eggers on your asses, it was a heartbreaking work of staggering genius, really an astonishing piece of storytelling. It told the story of the passion between three fans, a father and his two sons. The image depicted the late Mark Whelans, who was captured in a quite famous for the club 2011 iconic photograph celebrating a Palace goal scored with each of his two young boys in his arms, a moment of delirium. Mark tragically passed away in 2017 after battling cancer, but the love for Palace that he seeded deep inside his sons' hearts, it clearly lives on. Both, I think they're around the age of 20 now. They were both at Wembley together in their Palace shirts to keep the memory, no doubt, of their father alive. And on this greatest of days for their club, the tifo was raised of them and their father, frozen in time in a moment of wonder, the wonder that they hoped they would feel at the kick-off. Watching it, there's a beautiful photograph of the two of them hugging, absolutely in bits. And you look at it, and I thought, my God, Raw, if there was a Pulitzer Prize for tifos, and there should be, Crystal Palace would win it hands down. This is the best of football. A conscious understanding of what is important in their team's greatest hour, the small moments that are the most powerful for all of us. There's nothing more powerful than the memories it makes between generations of fans, fathers and mothers and sons and daughters. That is probably, Raw, we say it every week, it is football's greatest power.
Yeah, and it's the second time they've done it. Before the semi-final, the tifo was a shot. It was a tifo of another famous kind of iconic photograph of a Palace fan, a young boy clutching his shirt close to his chest with his hood up, which I think was after an FA Cup game of some sort, again, 5-10 years ago. The references, I think, are really potent. The fact that Palace's ultras do seem to have such a comprehensive grasp of their club's iconography, not the official stuff, but the stuff that actually makes up the mosaic of being a fan. And to use that as your inspiration, to use that as your kind of artistic license, I think is beautiful, and it's remarkable, and it's probably better than just handing a giant image of a cannon from the top tier of a stadium.
Oh, that's controversial. I can't wait for Beverton fans in about 20 years' time to raise up a tifo of that swole man from the weekend, topless in his next undies, just standing up, proud, pecs out, in the sun, with a vape, screaming for his team. That's also, in a way, what makes football great. But let's get into it. Huge respect again to Oliver Glasner. He came on our show on Friday. You can find it on our YouTube. It is life affirming, the joy. I mean, he's kind of harnessed the fans' joy, the fans' passion, put it at the heart of this team. Talks about how he planned to stun Pep, what's important to understand about football and life. What a bloke. Talking about super blokes this week, we're also launching a Bournemouth documentary, which we've shot. It's a half an hour show. On Thursday, we will release it. Their story from bankruptcy to the cusp, and I say the cusp with some agony, of Europe. It is really, really beautiful. And on Saturday, we're blessed with a 30-minute farewell from Kevin De Bruyne, who chose our platform for his final interview as a City player. Game's gone mad. Okay, let's do it raw. 145th FA Cup final. Manchester City 0, Crystal Palace 1. Spoiler alert. At a sunsplash Wembley, crowd of 90,000. About 80% of the noise coming from the Palace end. Really a reflection that for one club, Manchester City, this trophy would mean so incredibly little. Palace, it would be their everything. They had not won a single major trophy in their 119-year history. Never gone on to proper European competition. City, though, had all the momentum. Hadn't lost in 10 games charging into this one. But what struck me was how quietly confident Crystal Palace were going into this. Glasner talked about how he tried to instill a quiet optimism and belief in the individual in his team. My friend Chris Richards had talked about how Glasner had transformed his play mentally, and that whole collective arrived aware just how important this trophy was for their fans. Not just in the moment, but also as a way of cementing their hopes of shattering that mid-table ceiling, becoming a ever more sharp-toothed threat, despite the fact that I do believe Roy Hodgson's going to come back and be the third spell after Glasner ultimately leaves. But don't let me rain on your parade. City began as if determined to try and drive the Palace hopes back down their own throats early. They pinned the Eagles into that final third. Kevin De Bruyne, last hurrah in the spotlight, such an intelligent man. In the interview I had with him, it's really, really strange. You can tell that he's almost like an elite hero who has been broken up with and can't quite compute the pain, totally blindsided by all this. He doesn't understand being let go. Almost in this game, determined to show it in the opening moments, flinging passes around that mere mortals couldn't even see.
Yeah, it felt like his chance to kind of cement his legend, really, because De Bruyne, I think, has been one of the undeniably has been one of the kind of the great players of the Premier League era, the best midfielder of the last 10 years, this iconic figure. And it is a strange kind of coda to his story that he's been seemingly like unilaterally released by City. This doesn't appear to be a case where club and player have decided after a kind of long process that maybe they need to consciously uncouple, their priorities do not align. This seems to be City saying, look, Kevin, thanks, but just, off you go. And that doesn't feel fitting, it doesn't feel appropriate. Playing him in the cup final almost seemed like a little bit of a kind of nod from Pep Guardiola to say, okay, this is your moment, this is your chance. Go out as captain, lift the trophy, have one final kind of moment of communion with the fans. But then at the same time, he played him in a midfield that comprised Kevin De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva, which feels like a very 2021 Pep thing to do. And it looked, as much as City had the ball a lot in those first 15, 20 minutes, they didn't really do anything with it, to be perfectly honest.
God, I mean, that is a tribute to Oliver Glasner and the solidity that he's built in the back. The manager's actually matched up, not just tactically, but also in their black athletic leisure wear, which they wore on the sideline. And Glasner got to look on as essentially on this team's very first attack, turned into a memory that will be sung in ballads by Palace fans for generations to come. The Eagles broke the City press through the long ball, fed Mateta, worked it to Munoz too, I think Kamada, God bless Munoz, arrowed to the byline, pulled the ball back, found that space, that exquisite thread to the late arriving Eze. My God, how many times must they have worked on that in training? And what technique Eze employed to utterly thrash the ball through Akanji past a quite stunned Ortega with temerity and technical ability in equal measure. I love Eze. I've said this. We've sung his praises. He's come on this show and delivered, for me, one of my favourite interviews of last year. Just a humble gentleman, a man of community, a religious man, ultimate good guy, and a true street baller. Raw. Oliver Glasner talked about how he tried to express to his players to harness the joy they felt playing this game when they were kids in the schoolyard. We saw that in this moment, Raw.
Yeah, Glasner's been telling them quite a lot, apparently, to listen to the... There's a primary school quite close to Palace's training ground, which is in southeast London. And apparently Glasner has been telling them frequently to listen to the sound of the kids playing, because he wants to kind of instill in them, I guess, that sense that you're meant to enjoy this. It's meant to be fun. It's pressurised and it's stressful and it's your job. It's an industry. It's cutthroat and brutal. Right. But on some level, you're meant to be having a nice time. And Eze I think that's part of his appeal. And there is an English tradition of players like that, of not quite one club men. It's slightly maverick playmakers who tend to be big fish in smaller ponds, and it's a kind of an archetype that we recognise, and he fits the bill perfectly. But what struck me about that goal, as you said, is how obviously pre-planned it was. That whole move, I would not be surprised if Palace had worked out that exact move in that exact circumstance. The ball into Mateta, the layoff, the little quick interchange of passes to give Munoz time to bomb down the right. Eze holding his run, waiting to arrive late whilst Mateta's dragged everyone forward. They will have done that time and time and time again in training. And for Oliver Glasner, as much as this isn't the kind of romantic side of football, Glasner must have felt so much, this huge rush of kind of pride and gratitude and all these things. It's seeing all that work pay off to score a training ground goal in a cup final is magnificent.
You saw it in Glasner on the sideline. I think he went half Pardew with his dance celebration. But Eze, I love him so very much. That chess tournament he won last week was just the start of it. Jen can do it all. He really is that guy. I've watched him in a Crystal Palace camp in the Olise days, where he and Olise they could pick up anything. They could pick up table tennis bats for the first time within an hour, work out how to be incredibly proficient table tennis. He's the kind of guy that you could go bowling with, and he could just work out, having never bowled, how to bowl strike after strike after strike. He's incredible. And for Palace fans, he scored in the quarter-final, scored in the semi-final, scored now in the final. Big moments, big man. No doubt bigger teams coming in for him this summer, but that is still to come. City kept charging. It felt ominous. City groaning forwards. There was a hint of a handball, doing a lot of heavy lifting there as Dean Henderson flapped the ball away outside of his area-ish with Haaland bearing upon him. Then Tyrick Mitchell dove in, inviting almost Bernardo to collapse into his trailing leg in instalments. Penalty given. Haaland passed the shot up to Marmoush. He's missed three. Erling and Marmoush to kick. Savable height, not quite in the corner, but bloody hell, Dean Henderson swooping upon it like Miles Turner. Ball don't lie. It was an ecstatic moment of belief. Fourth goalkeeper ever to save a penalty in an FA Cup final. Interesting, Raw. He said post-game, Dean Henderson, he said, if Haaland stepped up, I wasn't sure where he'd go. But when Marmoush stepped up, I knew exactly where he was going. Anyone who looks at his heat map of penalties keeps popping them in the same spot.
Yeah, apparently he's quite a predictable finisher from penalties from Marmoush, and that's a slightly weird thing to exist, given that he must know that all the goalkeepers will have been told he always puts them to the left-hand side. That's just where he goes. I thought both of those incidents involving Henderson were a bit weird. The handball, I thought, and this is because I don't know anything about football, Rog, as previously discussed, I thought that if you handled the ball outside your area, you just got sent off. I thought that was kind of the deal. And the reason that the VAR gave was that he wasn't denying a goal-scoring opportunity, so it wasn't a red card, which means they couldn't pull the play back. But Erling Haaland was running through on goal, and I'm not quite sure what more sort of goal-scoring opportunity you need. So in that case, I think Palace basically got away with one.
Yeah, but when you said everyone in Britain was supporting the Palace.
I mean, I don't want
Even
to
the
imply
VAR.
that, Rog, but maybe
Even the VAR. Even
maybe,
they're like, oh, no, I saw nothing. Says
maybe
the VAR. While
the AIs...
wearing a 1980s Palace shirt and singing glad all over, pouring beers on their own head.
Maybe the AIs are on Palace's side as well, I don't know. And then the penalty... Guardiola said afterwards that they decided it on the pitch, that Haaland basically looked at it and thought, nah, you take it, Omar. And that's a very strange thing for any footballer to do. And it's normally the sort of thing managers get very cross about. And I thought it was striking that Pep didn't seem to be that upset.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the FA Cup. What was he going to do with it? He was going to use it as like a door jam for the youth academy, shove it under some wobbly table in the Manchester City canteen. I mean, ultimately... Dean Henderson's POV, what a 10 minutes that bloke had. I mean, the rush of blood madness and then the heroism within, 8-9 minutes, followed by, it needs to be said, another stunning swat from Doku. All of it in the crucible. What a game. City came out in the second half with a true ferocity down the flanks. Palace almost lulling them like sirens on the rocks, trying to counter so they could launch another biting attack. It was all this like an edging approach, I think you call it, towards glory. High risk, high reward. Chris Richards headed off the white-hot heat head of Haaland almost on his own goal line as Pep looked on, panic sipping his water. He flung on 19-year-old Claudio Echeverri for his debut as a first-team player. Left Grealish on the bench, if you want to talk about future soothsayers of changes coming over the summer. Nico O'Reilly spurned the best chance, froze when fed in by a mind-meld Vulcan Kevin De Bruyne through ball. I'd just say it all looked like two truly well-drilled, tactically astute teams going hammer and tongs, attack against resistance, effort versus perseverance. Even the medical staff squared up at one point. City's XG was actually 2.23 to Palace's 0.73. But ultimately, this game, Raw, you've kind of hinted about it, Erling Haaland, it was about blanks. 0 goals, 0 assists in 7 finals now for Manchester City, giving up the penalty in the key moment. It was really, for City, you could say it was a strange self-neutering.
City looked to me like a team caught between two eras. It seemed like a really kind of crystallised example of that, because you had this midfield that was once two of the best midfield, probably the two best midfielders of the last 10 years in the Premier League, Bernardo Silva and Kevin De Bruyne, who just looked a shadow of their former selves, who were playing catch up with what they used to be, and then around them, you had Nico O'Reilly, who obviously will be a major part of City next season. You had Echeverri coming on, who was signed as this sort of 17-year-old wonder kid from River Plate in Argentina, has never played for City before. I'm guessing feels that his move has not worked out quite as he wanted it to, and is then thrown on in an FA Cup final because Pep has not only ignored Jack Grealish, but dropped Rico Lewis and James McAtee completely from the squad, which didn't make much sense. They looked like a team who didn't quite know where... They didn't ever look, City, I think, like they knew how they were going to beat Palace. They looked like they had the tools, but they spent quite a lot of time with the ball, inching towards the Palace box, and Ruben Diaz would be standing 25 yards out from goal, and he would be City's furthest player back. And they passed the ball around the box, and you could tell they kind of thought, well, there's this big blonde guy standing in the middle, should we just aim it at his head and see what happens? And that isn't something that City ever used to do. And I think over the course of the summer, players will leave, players will come in, and Guardiola has to kind of forge a sense of, not purpose, but kind of a sense of this is how we do things. And I think that's been lost a little bit. Whereas Palace throughout, as much as they didn't have the ball, I think they're 22% possession, knew exactly what they were doing. There was a real discipline and organisation to them. I
want to talk about City in 1 second. I mean, there was that 10 minutes of added time was really in agony. I mean, tears for fears. Remember, Palace, 2 previous finals. I think the first one, they were ahead until 7 minutes to go. The second one, 2016, was it 9 minutes from victory? But then it was all over. Final whistle, just a deluge of tears from the Palace end. I want to break those down in a second because they were truly bona fide moving. There's no sovereign wealth fund backing, true joy, as close as we can come still in this moneyed football era to a true community club. Conscious making of memories, Brené Brown collective effervescence, just grown human beings in the stands, sobbing like children, and knowing they were sharing a memory that they'd have until their dying day, that they talk about for generations. And it was generational. But let's touch upon City, because you talk about the changes, Raw. Wounded, the post-champions, empty-handed for the first time since Pep Guardiola's first year, the 2016-17 season. That despite, it needs to be said, spending $250 million in January. Pep, God bless him, stays true to himself in these moments amidst the joy. Couldn't help but unleashing on penalty-saving hero Dean Henderson. Really an ill-judged target for him. Angry, I think, at the time that Hendo had taken to put the ball back into play in the second half. All I can say is there will be some dark night brooding in the Pep laboratory / back cave this next couple of weeks. He's going to simmer raw. He's going to anger design new avant-garde cargo pants. He's probably going to torture Kusanov a little bit. I like to think he now keeps Kusanov in a purpose-built little cage in the back of his study.
Quite where Guardiola goes from here, I think, is fascinating. I think City, for the first time in a long time, and I mean this almost as a compliment, will be quite interesting this summer. Because ordinarily, you kind of looked at them, they bought a couple of players, it was obvious they were going to be the best team in the league again, and everything stayed the same. But now, their spending in January was strange. Kusanov was overpriced and inexperienced. Vitor Reis, the Brazilian central defender, is clearly not nearly ready to play in the Premier League. I'm sure he's very talented, he may well come good. But their record of buying direct from South America recently, not brilliant. Julian Alvarez it worked for. Echeverri, 2 years on, not really made an impact at all. Marmoush, I think, is part of the future. I think he's been a real plus to the season. But it's difficult at this remove, I think, and this is really tempting fate, Rog, I can't believe I'm going to say it out loud. City will be better next season, but I don't think they'll have the aura that they did. I think that might have gone for a little bit longer than we recognise. It may well be that if they win 10 games in a row at the start of next season, then everyone suddenly thinks, oh right, okay, they're back. But if they don't, I think it feels like the work that needs to be done there is maybe slightly larger than we anticipated. They do look like a team that has lost its way a little bit. And their record in the transfer market in the last year, not great.
I do actually think for all of their resources, for all of Pep's brilliance, this rebuild, it is almost mental as much as it is tactical. That winning way, that commitment, the Gundogan way, the Vincent Kompany way. Kevin De Bruyne talked about it. I talked to him about the competitive edge and who embodied it and where it's gone in the interview. Rebuilding that mental culture as well as the tactical one is a challenge that's going to be fascinating to witness. But let's revel in Palace. FA Cup win. Price, has to be said, it's not financially all that. I think just over $5 million comes with the victory, which is really pennies on like the Champions League dollar, $100 million just for qualifying. But who cares? That's not why we watch it. That final whistle, Raw, glad all over. One of the truly edifying anthems of English football rang out. And it was just shot after shot of incredibly emotional Palace fans, grown humans reduced to childlike tears. It was wonderful. Innocence, watching a club they've loved achieve something they've dreamed of, yearned for, thought probably was never possible for their entire lives. Something their parents and grandparents had also dreamed of, but had probably in many cases not witnessed. Not just happy crying, but the real deal, sobbing uncontrollably, truly soulful stuff. This is wedding crying, this was funeral crying, this is birth of a child. Did remind you of football as life's most important, least important thing. Sometimes it seems like it's actually even more important than that. One scene I loved, the Palace fans milling around, was watching Alabama's own Chris Richards just draped in an American flag as his teammates chanted USA, USA, USA at him. Not just a bit player here. He has become mentally a true anchor, but not changed who he is, humbly. He's got quite an infectious laughter. He's a joyous, remarkable human being. I really, really adore him. Left Birmingham, Alabama, FC Dallas, plucked from the plains of Texas by Bayern Munich, was challenged to rebound after leaving there and has done, despite loan spells, injuries, including one that made him miss the 2022 World Cup. God bless him. I think he should be a face of this US team running into the World Cup in a much louder way than he has been. God bless. But also, the Palace joy, the Palace glory. Oliver Glasner, we've talked about him a lot, but Palace's worst start to a season since '93 this year. I think it took 9 games before they won. Thank you, Spurs, for correcting that. But that was all a distant memory, as was the voices who talked about Glasner must go. He said at the time, I remember he said, this is a time for hugging my players, not for kicking them. And he's worked out how to rebound and then to build this counter-attack on top of an incredibly solid defence. And that whip through Eze, Mateta, Munoz and Sarr. But it was his quote, Rory, that ultimately was the joy of things. Oliver Glasner, he said, ultimately the biggest success we can have is not winning the trophy. It's what we could give thousands of our fans, a moment for their lives. We can give them great times. Maybe they have some problems. We give them hours and days they can forget all of this, just being happy. That man understands the true essence of football.
But that was what was so good about that whole moment, was that we think about things in football too much for what they lead to. So you mentioned the prize money in the FA Cup. We see the FA Cup as though it's something you can put a kind of like a cash value on. Like, it's only worth $5 million to the club, so it's not that important. Or you quite often see it discussed in terms of, this means that Manchester City can complete the treble, or it means that such and such a team will get into Europe. I think Manchester United are in the Europa League final this season because they won the FA Cup. To them, the FA Cup was a route into Europe. It was a trophy, sure, and United were glad of it, but it was a route into Europe. Its meaning was kind of attributed to being what it led to. It wasn't a destination in itself. Whereas for Palace, all that mattered was that moment. That feeling of, before the referee blew his whistle, they had never won a trophy. And after the referee blew his whistle, they had won a major trophy. That moment of transformation, that's what that outpouring of joy was. And that's what gives the tournament its worth. It's when people cherish it and prize it and want to protect it for what it is, rather than for what it might be next, if you see what I mean. That I think is what was so powerful about it.
Oh, God bless you, Palace fans, about to experience your first bona fide European journey in the entire club's history. Just imagine Selhurst Park crackling on European nights to come. By the way, also imagine Liverpool Crystal Palace next weekend, Rory. Both teams have been on the lash after a night's long bender. That is why we watch. But to the league, Arsenal 1, Newcastle United 0, battle for second place Classico. A feat which once seemed as a given for Arsenal, but would require Newcastle to fumble. Raw, I'm old enough to remember back in February when Arsenal was hot on Liverpool's tail. Those were the glory days. They were 12 points clear in second place. Newcastle way back in 7th. Such a strong endgame for them. I mean, they still seem as a surprise package, but when you look at their recent history, there's no surprise. And you can tune into my other podcast, The Rest is Recent History, aka Recency Bias. But the fact these two teams are now eating at the same table, really a reflection of footballing truth. Newcastle arrived at the Emirates hoping to quite impudently snatch that second place. Mood at the two clubs, even though Arsenal were in second, Newcastle could not have been more different going into this one. And tune surged at Arsenal, weary Arsenal, in that first half, which was really like a goalkeeper great save dance-off. Pope made a fine save, I think, from Partey, but Raya, my God, string of incredible saves, didn't really get their due. Possibly because some of Raya's incredible saves came from Raya incredible mistakes that made them necessary in the first place. But there was really a trio of kinetic reflex saves that kept a quite lethargic, probably quite unmotivated Arsenal in the game. Newcastle did everything but score. Perhaps because they rested Alexander Isak. Is that now a thing? He was out with a knock, apparently. Is there a rule that I don't know, Raw, that a player can't play against his potential future club now, Raw?
It is now slightly, I mean, it's happened twice now. Obviously he missed the game at Anfield earlier in the season. It is slightly curious. Just obviously you'd assume that if Isak's not playing, it must be quite a serious injury, because Newcastle still haven't, and certainly before the game hadn't, secured Champions League football. So it's not like Eddie Howe will be saying to Alexander Isak, yeah, it's all right, Alex, if you're not really feeling it, just don't worry. We have to assume he has a proper injury, but it's definitely bad and curious timing.
It's like I don't celebrate against my former clubs. I also don't play against potential future employers. I just love this. But second half was really an inversion of the first. Arsenal did step up. They dominated possession, 55th minute. The unthinkable happened. I think with their 52nd shot of the season against Newcastle in the fourth meeting between the two teams, Arsenal finally scored a big boy goal. Declan Rice fed by Ødegaard after Anthony Gordon was dispossessed in a dangerous area. And first timer, God, he went boom like the Rizzler, did Declan Rice, 9th of the season. Banged his crest in celebration, a gesture which I think means that I have read the tabloid transfer rumours about me and I'm not going anywhere, ... yet. In many ways, game on. Arsenal had dropped 21 points from winning positions this season, really been their Achilles heel. Newcastle had harvested an incredible 19 points from losing positions, but they couldn't really lay a glove here. A game ended with a series of tired breaks and counter breaks. Honestly, so tired that the players who were running at the back line would sometimes just fall over with exhaustion, and Arsenal held on, had the joy of Kai Havertz's incredible return from a very serious hamstring injury at rapid pace. God knows what they've given him medically. Farewells to Tierney and Jorginho, and Newcastle just failed to become the first team to beat Arsenal four times in one season. Their Champions League hopes now depend on them beating Everton next weekend. The Racers' voice, they will. But it's incredible, Raw. 1 point separates them in third from 7th place Nottingham Forest. We'll get to that. Raw, last word on Arsenal as their home season comes to an end with kind of a collective groan. Champions League football secured. That is their everything. Third consecutive second place finish. Really footballing version of that misattributed Einstein quote about insanity doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results, aka Marv Levy's Buffalo Bills. You can talk about, we have all season, what went wrong. Arteta saying red cards, injuries, bad luck. You can make the case it's the exact opposite. Terrible decision making in key moments, players run into the ground, pulverised, lack of a striker incoming. But the question is, what changes now in this off-season for Anne Hathaway's boys? The good news is we're told this squad is in their prime. They're in their peak age-wise. Zubamendi coming in from Real Sociedad, said to have been wrapped up and a done deal. How much longer will Martinelli be trusted on the left? Ødegaard's drop-off. What happened there? That will be an agony to think through in this off-season. A Partey replacement, def. Someone reliable to allow Saka to rest and not run his legs off. I whisper this one. A big boy striker. Tell us, Raw, what do you expect in terms of reinforcements, and what can put this Arsenal squad, this squad of dreamers and aspirers, and God, I admire them so much, but what can put them that next level?
Well, as you say, they are a team who have got the right sort of age profile, so there's no reason to think that this is the end for Arsenal in any way. I mean, I think this second place will hurt more than the other two second places because of the nature of the team above them. Arsenal went into this season theoretically closer to winning the Premier League title than Liverpool, and yet have been beaten to it by Liverpool. That will hurt. But as you say, they are a young team. They've got a strong squad that is continuing to develop. I've been saying for like 2 years that the idea that Arsenal need a striker and that will solve all their problems is a little bit naive. It feels a bit simplistic, a bit it's kind of what you do on FIFA. Oh, they need a striker. Or on Football Manager, you need a striker, throw that in. That solves the algorithm, it solves the equation, off we go. It is more complicated than that. But watching them this season, it's really hard to believe that wouldn't make a major difference. Just having someone to provide a constant cutting edge in those games where I can see why Arsenal think that luck has been against them, but the way you win championships is you play so well and you play so dominantly that you make those moments of bad luck irrelevant. That's effectively what happens. Yes, sometimes you will get a red card that you don't really deserve in unfortunate circumstances. It's a lot easier to ride out that red card if you are already 2-0 up. The problem for Arsenal is that they've not been 2-0 up often enough to ride out their bad luck. And I think the way you do that is you have to go and spend an awful lot of money on a striker. But the challenge there is for Arteta, who doesn't like egos. And big strikers come with big egos. So it depends really on whether he's prepared to challenge himself as a man manager as much as anything else for Arsenal to take that step, I think.
So Michael Keane solved two problems at the same time. Baby man, bona fide goal machine. Friday night, Chelsea 1, Manchester United 0. I'm old enough to remember when this was the biggest epic clash of the season. Here it felt almost like an inconvenience game jammed in for two psychologically fraught clubs in perpetual chaos. Chelsea in 5th, final Champions League spot going into this, but precariously so, that jam behind them. United in 16th place. Without a Premier League win in 2 months. We'll talk about that in a moment. Same way as Arsenal in the early Arteta banter era were called like a fashion brand with a football team attached. United honestly have become almost a soap opera quite popular soap opera globally, with a football team kind of welded on there. All these rumours going into this one, despite the fact that it's a happy day. There's Europa League Cup final fast approaching. All the news is just like, Ruben Amorim is paying for Manchester United staff tickets after being told the club would not bring them to Bilbao. The end of season awards being cancelled, downgraded, trophy tour, a possible trophy tour, downgraded to, quote, a barbecue. And God, it just chaos. Amorim did pick a surprisingly strong side here, and the game still lacked quality until the 71st minute. Just a stunning moment of human wonder, stopping it from becoming just a purely bants game of Hoyland watches and the like. A moment of artistic transcendence. Pedro Neto played the ball to Reece James at the top of the Chelsea box. His touch and pirouette. It was like watching Tony Parker come back to life. Just like nasty wizard filth. Was it Garnacho who he duked out of his eyebrows? Freed up enough space to clip the no-look ball to the back post for Cucurella to smash past Onana. With, it has to be said, a quite brilliant header. A cacophony of celebration ensued, but God bless the James Dime. This player raw, the spatial intelligence, the bravery, the creativity, a beloved captain who suffered so brutally with injuries. I think it made it almost wistfully nostalgic to witness.
Yeah, he's been as unlucky as anyone I can remember, to be honest, Reece James, and it does feel as though he's certainly got, he's got to make up for lost time now, try and stay fit, because he was, when he first came through, he looked like Trent Alexander-Arnold without the defensive problems. He was he had that incredible sort of whipped delivery. He was technically brilliant, fast and strong, could do everything. He looked like the kind of platonic ideal of an English right back. He's fallen way down the pecking order now. He's kind of almost a forgotten man, I think, outside Chelsea. Him being back long term gives the team a little bit of kind of stability, a little bit of consistency, a constancy that it's really been missing. He is important, I think, like morally as much as he is important technically and tactically.
Chelsea, God bless, somehow have their Champions League fate in their own hands into this final game of the season. The epic clash against Nottingham Forest, it's like a playing game for Champions League play. Maresca said post-game. I love, by the way, this new kind of angry manager firing broadsides, radical truth at their own club, even in times of wonder. He said, you people, the press, think it's the same Chelsea as years ago. It's not the same Chelsea. It's a completely different Chelsea. Hopefully we can bring the club where they deserve to be. Champions League. For Manchester United, statistics are just inexcusably dire. Fewest wins, most defeats, fewest goals, most goals conceded, games without a win, fewest points. There's also this truth, which is just peak hello darkness for Ruben Amorim. In December, Manchester United had 30 points. In May, they have 39 points. 9 points added in 5 months. Let's say they defeat Spurs Wednesday night, which is very, very possible, Raw, and backdoor their way into the Champions League. Does it even matter? Or is this club too far gone? Should the fans just savour the evening as a one-off occasion of joy, a night out almost?
Well, Amorim said this, hasn't he? He said that winning the Europa League doesn't solve their problems. And then he kind of said, well, it gives us more money and it means we're in the Champions League, which, to be honest, does solve quite a lot of problems. But yeah, I think a lot of the underlying stuff remains, that it's really hard to see. I think it's impossible to believe that Manchester United next season, even with Champions League football, even with the ability then to attract, in theory, like a higher calibre of player, aren't going to touch Arsenal or City or Liverpool. I think it seems they are too far behind them for that. But it's the alternative that I think is more worrying. That what if they don't win the Europa League? What if they aren't in the Champions League next season? What if Ruben Amorim has put all of his eggs into one basket and they all, I don't have to continue this metaphor, Rog, they all fall out? I don't know what happens, or the basket's not there, or Ange Postecoglou steals it, one of those things. Then all of a sudden you have a team that have finished
debasketed
16th in the Premier League, that have added 9 points this year. I think the only teams they've beaten since January are Leicester and Ipswich. It's been their worst season since 1974, when Manchester United were relegated. It's really hard to see, without winning in Bilbao on Wednesday, how Amorim keeps his job.
I could not agree with you more. And I do believe Ange Postecoglou, I think the basketing thing is, I'm going to drink your basket or something like that. I don't know how
a basket is almost certainly an Australian unit of drink.
I'll have 2 baskets of lager, please, love. Talking about Spurs, let's go back in time again to Friday night. Aston Villa 2, Tottenham 0. Not a night of of agony and embarrassment for Big Ange. I don't know what the opposite of demoralising is. It's not moralising. It's demoralising. Moralising. Are those? God, I don't even know my etymologies anymore. Just to say, this was not the ideal way to prepare yourself for a Europa League knife fight to come. Played 4 under-20s, a 25th defeat of the season, all comps, equalling the club record for a single campaign set in 1991-92, and you don't even get a trophy for it. Spurs have now lost 8 of their past 11 top flight games. It's incredible. Villa were slow, they were leggy, as they have been down the business end of this season, but it didn't matter. They seemed fraught, the pressure of Champions League on their shoulders right down the line. The game went like Jerry Rafferty. Had to rely on that old heel king / goalkeeping singularity, Emi Martinez, the G-Soat, if that's a thing, greatest Towser of all time. He was in tears at the final whistle, as if this could have been his last ever game at Villa Park before brushing up his Arabic on Duolingo with a Saudi move, rumoured and rumbled. But once Villa opened the scoring, it was as if they're like, my God, we made this so much harder than it should have been. They just went and did it again. 3rd straight win for Villa, 3rd straight shutout, up to 5th place. Game more than City, though, who played Tuesday against the Cherries. Weirdest thing about this game, Raw, is Villa have soared and touched the heavens this season and might not make the Champions League. They play at Manchester United on the last day of the season. Spurs have been woeful, abject, miserable. Team who spent essentially a season taking a dump in their own pants but lacked the ability to change their undies. Yet win on Wednesday against fellow Millhouse weakling Manchester United. They would be in the Champions League next season. It's almost surreal performance art of sliding doors.
Yeah, we've got to be careful here, Rog, because Ange got really upset when I think Arsene Wenger said that he didn't think the team that wins the Europa League should get into the Champions League. And Postecoglou said it was to do with, mention Spurs and it makes people crazy. And I've got to admit, initially, I sympathise with Postecoglou there. Those are the rules. There's absolutely no harm in it. If you win one competition, you get into another one. That makes perfect sense to me. In this case, it does feel weird because, and it won't do for kind of people who are in Italy or France or Spain or Germany or whatever, who are mainly following their own domestic leagues. They will have an awareness that Spurs and United have been pretty bad in the Premier League this season because of the cultural impact, the sort of global significance of the Premier League. But if you are primarily Premier League focused, and you look at Tottenham and Manchester United, who have been historically bad, who have been bad in a way that is not actually economically explicable, it is baffling that one of the two of them should be in the Champions League, to the extent that I think there is a solid case to be made that whichever one wins should refuse to take up the spot in the Champions League. They should say, look, we don't deserve this. This is ridiculous.
Let me give it to one of the Bs.
Give it, no, not even to one of the Bs. Give it to the champions of Belgium. Give it to someone who's actually, give it to PSV Eindhoven, who came from 9 points down.
Why just Genk when you can have Ghent in there as well? Is that
exactly.
Give it to one of the Gs. Give
it to Genk and or Ghent or some sort of team that's made up of, comprised of players of the two.
God, but by the way, that would be amazing. That's my dream. I could do a whole pod on discuss best Genk mixed 11. God bless you. To Ange Postecoglou on Wednesday. Of course, we're all Postecoglouites on this show from earlier in the season, but the man looks ever more. I mean, the suffering at levels of Book of Job. I read it this weekend to myself while watching the game. That final quote of Job. You can imagine it in an Australian accent. For Ange, I go about mourning, I cry out for help, I am a brother of jackals, a companion of ostriches, my skin grows black and falls from me, my bones burn with fever, my harp is turned to mourning, and my flute to the voice of those who weep. Godspeed to Tottenham in every regard. I don't know the meaning of the Book of Job, but my God, I'm not sure it's true that we must trust even when we are suffering. But Spurs fans, you know that even better than I do, and I'm an Evertonian. Someone posted on our Instagram that 17th place is a trophy that should be known as the Everton Cup, and I love that. To London, West Ham 1, Nottingham Forest 2. Sunday morning must win for the quite tenacious Tricky Trees. They'd watch their fellow top 5 contenders win on Friday, Chelsea and Villa. They knew they had to win this one. They'd won just one of the last 6. The good news, they were just taking on West Ham now, who had nothing to play for other than being able to still laugh at Spurs and United below them in the table for added incentive. Forest playing for their teammate Taiwo Awoniyi, the man who suffered a quite terrifying abdominal injury that required multiple surgeries last weekend. He was placed in a medically induced coma, from which, thank God, he's since been woken up. That was clearly top of mind for the players. It must have been an agony for them as they took the field again. They were wearing warm-up shirts, bearing the message, "We're with you, Taiwo." And when Morgan Gibbs-White opened the scoring, he held up quite emotionally Iwoanie's jersey. And yet again, West Ham, woeful, booed off at half-time by their fans. What an agony they've been through. Forest doubled their lead off a set piece, and then West Ham fans were given a reason to still believe. 86 minutes. If you've not seen this goal, find it. It was a stunner from everyone's favourite agriculture fitness expert, Jared Bowen. Flicked the ball up with the back of his heel and then swivelled a sweet crushing volley to make for some, let's just say, very last, long, tense moments for Forest fans. And by many, there were 70 minutes of added time. A lot of time-wasting masterclass going on. Argy-bargy aplenty. Forest able to see it out to set up a quite delicious Championship Sunday clash against Chelsea. Let me ask you this, Raw, very quickly. If you'd offered Forest before this season, a Forest fan, a Europa League berth, even a Conference League berth after the season before when they just dodged relegation, wouldn't they have bitten your arm off? But there's some who'd be, at this point, disappointed if they missed the Champions League spots after spending all that time in third place. I mean, I guess I'm asking you to channel the little Evangelos Marinakis that lies within all of us, Raw. How do we judge the back half of this Forest season?
I'm not sure the three words "little Evangelos" and Marinakis are often heard together.
The little Evangelos that lies within. I like to think we got... sometimes you get like a little heartburn. I think it's just your little Marinakis within, just trying to get out there.
Just trying to, I ate too quickly. I've got just a touch of the Marinakis.
Get some Tums in me. I've got some Marinakises.
Yeah, I think it's perspective, isn't it? Yeah, absolutely. At the start of the season, if you'd said you're going to be probably in the Europa League, people would have been like, that's incredible. Forest returned to Europe for the first time since the 1990s, a chance for the club to take kind of the logical next step. But it's purely and simply that they sat in third for so long, 90% of which was because of how good they've been for the first two-thirds of the season, and 10% of which was because the teams beneath them, the more traditional occupants of the Champions League slots, didn't really get their act together. They now have Newcastle until Sunday been on an incredible run. I think they've won 8 and 10. City until the cup final had started to look not like their old selves, but they were kind of grumbling along pretty nicely. Villa had come strong again. They were under pressure. Chelsea even had managed to kind of arrest their decline. And that's put Forest under pressure, and they've stumbled just at the wrong moment. I think it's fair enough now for the fans to feel that not making the Champions League is a bit of a disappointment, given where they were kind of at the start of April almost. But that said, if they don't make it, I think they will make it, because I think they'll beat Chelsea on the last day. If they don't make it, I think by the time the Europa League actually rolls around, Forest will be extremely excited to be in it.
God bless. Irrespective, again, European night at the City Ground. That is why we watch. In other games, Brentford 2, Fulham 3, 2 goals in 2 minutes changed this game. Snap of the neck from Tom Kearney, soon to be of Wrexham. Then a majestic arcing thump from Harry Wilson, third of the season for him against Brentford. He netted the stoppage time double back in November to deliver victory. Dude, honestly, it's like a Welsh Lamine Yamal, but only against the Bees. Both sides' European hopes dented by Crystal Palace FA Cup victory, which means 8th spot may no longer secure a Conference League place, which is really quite bloody cruel. To Leicester City 2. Ipswich Town 0. The joy of football, as we said up top, can be that there's intense drama, even in a game that means less than nothing. This was a relegation dead rubber. 2 already relegated teams playing a game that would essentially just serve as the backing track for Jamie Vardy's final ever, having a party. 13 years. The symmetry was what was amazing. 13 years from the very day in which he signed for the Foxes. It was his goodbye amidst the flames. Flags bearing his likeness, large goat banner, Leicester's trumpeter playing loud and proud. It was all like a medieval banquet meets Kiss concert. perfect for Vardy. That quite irrepressible force who would not be denied, especially against an Ipswich backline that has provided flimsy resistance all season. Vardy one last trademark sprint in and finish, 28th minute, angled home, roared off, shushed the crowd, raised the corner flag aloft, 200th Leicester goal in his 500th appearance for the Foxes. Really amazing is over half of those goals came after he turned the age of 30. He's now 38. He departs. Partially a wrestling heel, really a special man. I asked him earlier this year how he wants to be remembered by Leicester fans. He didn't have to think, he just goes for the carnage. And I said, not for your goals. He said, he looked at me like I'm an idiot. He goes, the goals are part of the carnage. They lead to the carnage, don't they? Raw, we're not going to see the like of this man again, I don't think. The Guardian called him a non-league personality who made it to the very top. What will you remember him for? Was it his ruthless relentlessness, his finishing, his Red Bull intake, or really the Einstein-level thinking that provided the casual English pub closing time connection between, and I quote, chatting the shite and getting banged?
That's one of the all-time great football quotes, isn't it? You can see it at some point being taught in schools as one of the principles.
By the way, it is. There's so much. Those 4 words.
Yeah.
A whole theology could be based. It's reward and punishment, isn't it?
It's definitely a core tenet of like the Premier League Talmud, I think. That is
Talmud? What's the Talmud? Go on.
The Vardy, I think calling him a non-league personality who made it to the top is a little bit sneering, if I'm honest. I think that feels a little bit kind of middle class and condescending. He is not necessarily a hugely likeable figure, but I think he's made the Premier League a richer place. The goals, at his best, he was an incredible goal scorer. Just the movement, the energy. I've spoken to defenders who said he is an absolute nightmare to play against, that people hate playing against Jamie Vardy. I think I'd have hated being in a team with him. I don't think me and Jamie Vardy would have got on, if I'm completely honest.
Really?
Yeah, I think I do quite like chatting and do not want to get banged.
Do you not like, for the 100th time, finding your underpants filled with like DP? Vardy again.
Not my kind of vibe. But I think the carnage is he brought carnage. When at his best, that's what he did. He turned the Premier League upside down. He broke the goal scoring record for most goals scored in consecutive games. He was this huge kind of compelling figure. And we talked about it before. The Premier League is not just a football competition. It's not just a thing in which football matches are played. It is this sort of all-encompassing lifestyle drama. And Vardy was central to it for quite a long time. He is a really outsized character. He has broken the bounds of sporting fame into a type of mainstream fame. But to be honest, Roger, I'm not sure that for the rest of us, obviously Leicester will be very sad to see him go. But for the rest of us, I'm not sure that's true. I think Jamie Vardy will be in the Premier League next season.
You do? He says he still believes he's got what he takes to play in the Premier League. By the way, so did KDB. He said that mental voice inside knows I can play at this top level. I find it hard to believe any team will bring that chaos into that locker room on those wages and that diminishing number of minutes he's going to have to offer. But God bless. R.I.P. Housing Prince. I just realised he's going to play for Everton next season now, isn't he? By the way, it's lovely to see Casey McAteer get his first ever Premier League goal. Kid who joined the club at 8 years old and will probably now be their striking future. Brighton host hungover Liverpool this afternoon. A team who found a brilliant way to push Trent booing out the spotlight, which is by clubbing and partying all week in a style really reminiscent of peak Charlie Sheen, Kate Moss or Ernest Hemingway, which brings us to Everton 2, Southampton 0. Farewell Goodison Park. Tens of thousands of Evertonians mobbed the streets before the game. We've seen fire, we've seen rain, we've seen sunny days we thought would never end at that place. That grand old home, host to 2,789 matches since 1892, which is 10 years. My wife can't get over this. Goodison Park was built 10 years before the Wright brothers even took flight. This was their one last dance. I got up at 5:10 in the morning in New Orleans. No mean feat when you've tied one on the night before. And I sat in the darkness of my hotel room watching on with my kids. My second son, Bear, said to me, he goes, Dad, as the game was about, he goes, Dad, I think about Kevin Morales all the time. And I've never felt proud. Honestly, I started sobbing again, just thinking that my son's heads are full of just dashing footnotes from their formative years. David Moyes had chosen to play the classic, started Seamus Coleman. First exhumed Seamus Coleman, then played him. Honestly, felt as beautiful watching Seamus lead this team out as when you watch Field of Dreams and shoeless Joe Jackson steps out the corner. That's what it felt like. It was profound. It was that energy when the teams walked out against Southampton, relegated Southampton, amidst the din, a meaningless game. But hearing Z Cars, the music that Everton played before the game, in the darkness of that hotel room, Raw, it was overwhelming. I'm not going to lie, it won't surprise you. I did sob watching the Blues, who I have seen win titles. Listeners, Everton won titles in my youth. I've seen relegation staved off by last-minute wonder goals. I have cried watching a lot, sobbed tears of joy, of agony, of mourning. We all have. And now it's gone. Yes, the women's team are going to play at Goodison next season. It will live on. But the matchday Premier League ritual, the noise, the Z cars, the generational biblical heroes that we all have, our personal biblical begatting. Bob Latchford begat Graham Sharp, begat Leighton Baines, begat Thomas Gravison, Fellaini, Romelu Lukaku, all the way to beautiful, beautiful Beto. And above all, the spirit, Raw, that has kept us going that last decade of darkness. Let's be honest, it's been terrible. The spirit of tenacity, of perseverance, of passion, and the deepest love. And Raw, now it's gone.
But a lot of it will be rekindled, I think, at Bramley Moor and at the Hill Dickinson Stadium, in fact, as it's now known. But there's
we'll
no
talk
question
about
that it is. It's genuinely as a non-Evertonian, it's really sad because Goodison Park is a genuinely great stadium. It is part of the Premier League landscape. It's part of my footballing landscape, and it's really strange to think. It's brilliant. It'll be used for Everton's women's team. Certainly, initially, that's a fantastic idea for kind of keeping the stadium alive. But to not have it in the Premier League, I think it'll be a slightly poorer place for it. To be honest, a slightly more comfortable place, but poorer.
Well, let's talk about it. I mean, it's a time of deep, profound transition. The game itself irrelevant. Southampton, God bless, and Dye opened the scoring. Stunning goal of creative violence. Just picked the ball up and kind of drove arced the ball in. One of those goals where you think, why did they not do that more? Finished again sharply on the stroke of half time. But the match ended with Everton players on the bench. You watch the last 10 minutes, they were just craning round to stare out at the fans. Just a complete reversal of the normal traditional roles of football, which I do think paid tribute to the spirit of the Blues, which has kept us going. It really is. We have been on fumes for much of the last decade of darkness. Just that wonder of the fans, that profound love. And that's what's going to move to the new stadium. A lot of you are saying, how am I not devastated? I'm not sad. The best of the club will be making the move to the new stadium. I've been to the new stadium. It is magnificent. And I hope more than anything, Roy, it will act as like a catalyst for the bold new future, which is just a refraction of that of the past. This club have won things. This is a great club. This is a winning club. There is glory in our DNA. It has been absolutely battered, terrible self-inflicted wounds by the last ownership. But this new stadium, I'm hoping, Raw, like a butterfly, is it a caterpillar goes into a chrysalis, and then like a beautiful monarch butterfly emerges from that chrysalis. That's what I'm hoping for in this moment.
I've always thought with Everton, and it applies to other clubs as well, that part of the problem is the history, that there is this sense of Everton should do things a certain way, that Everton have to compete. They can't be a stepping stone club. I think in the past they've sort of rejected the chance to sign players because it was obvious that those players thought that they'd be at Everton for a couple of years, then they'd move on. And Everton's pride and dignity and the weight of all that they have done means that they can't really accept that. I wonder whether, under the new ownership with the new stadium, there is a chance to kind of start to rebuild Everton for that first step of what it needs to be in the modern world, in modern football. Because Everton of the 1980s can't be conjured from here. You have to go through a process. And it does feel as though around Everton there is, for the first time in a long time, there's actually a little bit of kind of impetus, a little bit of drive, a little bit of purpose. And the new stadium's part of that. So as sad as it is to see Goodison Park go, like you say, that a home isn't just the bricks and mortar. A home is all the memories you've made there, and Everton will carry those with them to Bramley Moor. And that love and that passion and that kind of adoration and enthusiasm, the perseverance as well, that will all make its way down to the docks. what they need, what hopefully they can be accompanied by, is a sense of renewal and renewed vigour. Because that's what Everton have lacked for quite a long time.
I mean, that's what I felt like. I felt like a relief at the final whistle more than anything, Rod, that we'd made it. After a decade of like edging relegation, we had season after season. I've done live shows in America with Frank Lampard after that relegation season, where he leant into the mic and goes, "We've learnt our lesson, we won't do it again," and then he did it again. We just keep looking death in the eye and saying, not today. Just David Moyes himself said post-game, he said, these are his words, the club looked broken, felt broken, doesn't feel like that anymore. I love that man. I adore his optimism. I love that energy. By the way, it would be the most Everton thing of all time to move into a new stadium and just get relegated in the first most miserable season. But the way the reaction, I do want to shout out, the stadium is now being called the Hill Dickinson after a local, I think now global law firm stepped in to sponsor it. It's been also beautifully negative, which is wonderful Everton. Wonderful football fan. A reminder that 22% of being a football fan at least is venting, finding a way to be incandescently angry. But ultimately, I hope, insignificant reasons, Raw. I for one, cannot wait, Raw, for Everton to play in the Big Dick.
I saw someone
Go down to the Big Dick!
I saw someone on Twitter suggest that maybe you could refer to it colloquially, Rog, as the Dixie.
Oh my God, yours is, again, so much better. I like the notion of re-signing Rich Arlison. Come and play in the Big Dick, lad. Like, genuinely, I did want to put that on his Instagram page, but I like the Dixie, down in the Hill Dixie. My God, Raw.
We've solved it.
Yeah, solved it. So farewell to Goodison. It is needed, ultimately. That is the core in this financial realm of football. I do think, ultimately, that Thoreau quote, there's two quotes that came to mind this weekend. The Thoreau quote that, I'm paraphrasing, I left the woods for a good reason as I went there. It was because I'd lived there long enough. There's some of that. But there is a power of memory that clings to this moment, and it's a Murakami. I often turn to Murakami in these moments, and he said, no matter how much suffering you went through, you never wanted to let go of those memories. That is what home is. That's what Goodison is. And we will carry those memories, that pain, that sense of wonder, that sense of passion with us. Raw. To the mailbag, which overbulged this week. It's an incredible thing. Your observations, your questions, your insights, your love that you send to us weekly at meninblazers@gmail.com. Letter of the week, which we will send a patch to from a great GFOP from Australia. Good Lord, Andy Lane. Raw, he's far, far from our manor, but please do the honours.
I'm going to do this exclusively in an Australian accent, Rog. G'day, Rog and Rory. That'll be it, don't worry.
By the way, he did write g'day. I just want to go on record. Raw's not like doing bits here. Andy Lane, g'dayed it.
That's how they talk, the Australians. That's just what they, that's it wouldn't occur to them that's an unusual thing to do.
If I started my letters g'day, people would be like,
you're an American. You should start your letters with howdy. Everyone knows that. Love your work. My brother introduced me to your dulcet tones a few years ago, and you are now our main source for football opinion and information, which is a troubling insight into the modern world. Even though we are Australians, nice to apologise, and have little connection to Christian Pulisic. The way you frame football as a shared human joy is something all fans can aspire to. We are now in Scotland, having been to our first match together, Heart of Midlothian against St Johnstone at Tynecastle. My Scottish club, Hearts, actually. Well done. Good choice.
Mine's Dumbarton, just for the record.
Oh, cracking. Lovely. There's some great Scottish club names are the best in the world. Given we didn't grow up with a team in our blood as you both did, I'm interested in your take on the following. In the last 10 years, would you rather have been a fan of a team like Leicester, a glorious Premier League win followed by a near decade of promotion and relegation, or a team like Arsenal, European football but perennial bridesmaids? How important is that Premier League win? Also, a point of order. When Rog says bite your arm off, whose arm is he biting? Is he saying, I would bite your arm off, I would bite my arm off, or is there a third person consensually involved? Courage, always courage. I've actually wondered that before, Rog. Whose arm are you biting? Are you biting my arm?
By the way, I googled the etymology of this, Andy. I didn't want to tell you. By the way, I believe legally it needs to be spelled yer, Y-E-R, and not your, Y-O-U-R. It feels very Cockney to me for some reason. And I'm embarrassed for someone who uses that phrase so much to not fully understand where it comes from. No one seems to be honest, after a very quick Google search. I think it means if you reached out your hand and offered me something, a repressed English person who doesn't shout, doesn't know how to feel any emotions, would be so excited in that setting that I would sever the very arm doing the offering. So there's that. And if anyone knows better than I do the etymology, I'd love to know, meninblazers@gmail.com, because it all is a bit, when you think about on the Hannibal Lecter scale, Rory.
Is it not dog related? Because I think of it as being bite your hand off. That would be the phrase I use. But is it not an excited dog when you offer them a treat will bite your hand off?
Oh, mate, again, I do not know. It's another phrase that is constantly confusing to me, the dog's bollocks, which is an English phrase we used in my teens. And up north, the dog's bollocks is something great. Down south, it was something that wasn't that good. When you think about it, the dog's bollocks, I don't understand why that would be associated with something wonderful. All of these things...
The dogs quite liked them.
Apparently. So 9 out of 10 dogs do like them, even though 5 out of 10 dogs no longer have them. But, Raw, to the question, with Palace fans sobbing tears of joy after this weekend, it's a great time to ask it. I mean, this is the football version of one gorilla against 100 humans, or one glorious season against 100 second-place finishes. What would you choose, you Liverpool fan, who has not really had to do the choosing because, you've had a lot of glory recently, Raw. So try and answer the question in a detached, neutral observer way.
I think the Palace example kind of proves it, that you would probably take Leicester's last 10 years over Arsenal's, if I'm completely honest. They've won the Premier League. They've won the FA Cup. I know Arsenal have won the FA Cup. But Leicester see the FA Cup as my dad's a Leicester fan, and he was, if anything, more pleased with the FA Cup win than the league win, because in the 50s and 60s, Leicester not being able to win the FA Cup was a real thing. It was part of the club's kind of identity. If you look at what the Carabao meant to Newcastle, what the FA Cup meant to Palace, I think you take some pain for some glory, you take lows to have the highs. So you can certainly make the case it's a difficult choice, and I think if push came to shove, I don't think Leicester fans will ever forget. I think they'll put up all sorts of pain and suffering for that Premier League win. So I think you probably say Leicester.
I think in the pandemic, I took up hiking, and that feeling of peaking when you break through the clouds and just reach the top, the summit, it's ineffable. Feeling the exhausted limbs of glory as you look down on all comers. And ultimately, I don't want to say I admire what Arsenal have achieved so very much. I really do. I love Mikel Arteta. I don't diminish his achievement. I do think it's a hero's journey in its own sense. I try and find what's admirable humanly in all of it. But I think I would choose the glory too, Raw. Also the pain. Because I do think pain is also worthy of being celebrated, not shied away from. Sporting pain is the safest pain we can experience. We're all the same after it. Many of you have college kids who've graduated last week or next weekend. Congratulations to all of you. I know a lot of you, we had a lot of invites to speak at graduations. It's been a crazy time. I didn't get to do any of them. My kid just graduated. And I did say to him, ultimately, tenacity is above all the greatest quality in football and in life. It is, the friendships that you make in the process. Open your heart even to failure. Don't be afraid of what comes next. Life is full of surprises. Just jump into it. Try things, risk things with big heart, with curious brain. Don't fear the mistakes, because ultimately you learn so bloody much from the mistake. I mean, even the rude Misselroy appointment mistakes, you can learn so much from moments of challenge. Trouble is opportunity. And all that matters, I think, is how you respond in life, with thought, with action, with care, with love. So bringing that back to football, it means Leicester, even in this hour of relegation, that moment for your dad, for fans, that they will never forget, that soaring moment of ecstasy, Raw. It's got to be Leicester all the way, right?
Yeah, it's sports about moments. It's not about, as much as it's admirable to have kind of that consistent qualification for the Champions League, to have the best players, to have these incredible nights in Europe. It's about moments, and I'm not sure you'll ever top that Leicester moment.
God bless, and thank you, Andy, there in Australia. A patch is on its way to you. Send us your postal. That is it for today. I'm off to Boston this week. We've got Kevin De Bruyne. Really a beautiful interview. I hope dropping on Saturday. We have the Bournemouth epic movie dropping on Thursday. We're taping with Ryan Reynolds on Wednesday. Rory and I will be live after the final whistle of the Sadness Classico, Manchester United against Tottenham in the Europa final on Wednesday. Come and be with us live on YouTube. Keep writing to us. Send us photos of your pets and their footballing connections and more. meninblazers@gmail.com. They give us energy and love that we need to get through the week. God, we are, is it 300 88 days away from World Cup 2026 kicking off on this turf. Let's savour each one. But Raw, thank you. Huge love to you, you Crown Prince of Harrogate.
And now it's time to build up, Rog, to the worst best game in history.
The worst best game of all time without Everton in it. This is Rog sending you big love. Let's not take a second of watching football together for granted, and courage.